Bibina Mabana. When I first came to Africa 30 years ago, I was surprised at the level of development. When I'm here, still living in Africa, not that much has changed over the last 30 years, except for some Dar es Salaam and the like. But if you go out in the hinterlands, not a whole lot has changed. Na mimi naweza kusema hivi kwa sababu niliishi Lindi, Dodoma, Dar es Salaam na sasa hivi naishi Zanzibar. Hata kijijini naishi. The next 30 years will be a complete transformation in everybody's lives, all of humanity's lives. A transformation we have never seen before in the history of humanity. This is happening in our generation, in our lifetimes, and it's creating opportunities and disruptions that we can hardly even imagine. Why do I know this? I work at a place called Singularity University in Silicon Valley, and I work with a team of thought leaders who are the cutting-edge thinkers on the future of AI, robotics, digital manufacturing, digital biology, etc. And we advise corporations and governments and entrepreneurs and investors around the world on how to leverage those technologies to solve the world's biggest challenges. And I've come to realize that when we think about the future, we have tools to help us, and I'm going to share some of those tools with you now. But really the biggest limiting factor is our own imagination. Our own imagination. This is from Black Panther. This movie is drawn from this genre of Afrofuturism, science fiction combined with African-centric views of the future. Why do I like it? Because it unleashes us from previous narratives and previous histories about where we are now and allows us to think about what's possible in the future. What kind of world would we want to live in the future? And in fact, I'm going to invite you right now to close your eyes for just like 15 seconds and imagine in your best future, what does the world look like 30 years from now? Just spend 15 seconds, if you will. Close your eyes. What does that world look like 30 years from now? Ninafikiri mtu mmoja hapa alifikiri mimi niliona chapati nyingi sana kwenye nyumba yangu. Hata mimi nasikia hii, lakini for me, when I think about the future, I think about things like ubiquitous and free energy. I think about water everywhere, clean water everywhere for everybody and for every industry that needs it. I think about a sustainable environment that's regenerative and growing. And this is all possible and doable. We have the tools to make this happen now. What are these tools? It's driven by something called the exponential growth in computing. You might have initially heard of Moore's Law, 1970s, Gordon Moore noticed that every 18 months, more or less, they're able to double the computing power on a silicon wafer, and he coined Moore's Law. And he was basically correct. Our own thought leader at Singularity University, Ray Kurzweil, said, actually, this is part of a bigger pattern, a much larger pattern. And that is, any technology which becomes digital in nature is subject to exponential growth. Ray Kurzweil plotted this graph out, and very important, you have to remember your maths to appreciate this graph. This is a logarithmic curve. So this is the price performance of computing power over time since the 1900s. It's on a logarithmic curve, meaning every hash line is a power of 10 above. So in fact, this curve is very, very steep. And what you notice about this curve is not only is it very steep in terms of exponential growth, but it's smooth. World wars happened, and this curve continued. Depressions happened, and this curve continued. It's as if The exponential growth in computing of information consolidation has an internal power and momentum and life of its own. This challenges our received way of thinking about the world. We are all programmed, every single one of us have been programmed over millennia as human beings to think in a very local and linear manner. We think, watu wa kijiji, wanafikiri watu mama za kijiji. And linear, meaning next year's growth is just going to be incrementally more than last year's growth. Because that's the way change has happened. Change in the digital world, in our current global world, does not happen that way, even though we are all programmed and have inherent biases to think this way. Our challenge is to throw that off quickly, because our world is exponential and global. And the faster you get that into you reprogram yourself, the more comparative advantage you will have to be successful in whatever your endeavor is. I know it's hard to think exponentially. That graph that I showed you is very abstract, so let's do a little exercise. If you go outside right now and you take 30 steps of a meter each, you'll roughly go about 30 meters, right? If you take 30 exponential steps, 1 is 1, 2 is 2, 3 is 4, 4 is 8, 5 is 16, etc. 30 exponential steps where you're growing exponentially step after step or year in, year out, how far will you go? Any brilliant mathematicians in the room?
1,000,000 kilometers, 1,000,000 kilometers roughly.
You go 1,000,000,000 meters. Is that 1,000,000 kilometers? Bing, you get the prize. Thank you. See, yeah, give the man an applause. Ningekuwa na zawadi kutupe sasa hivi. Why is this important? This is phenomenally important because in our world, everything is going digital. Everything. All of our economic systems, our social systems are transforming into the digital space. And yet we continue to think linearly. We continue to think next year's growth is just going to be a little bit over last year's growth. It's going to be a little over the previous year's growth. When actually it's doubling every year. So one person who's thinking linearly goes 30 steps, 30 meters. The person who's thinking exponentially goes 1,000,000,000 meters, 26 times around the planet. That's how far out they are thinking in terms of the exponential growth of technology. So if you're thinking linearly, you're going to be left behind. Ray Kurzweil says this applies to all technology, all digital technology is subject to what he calls the law of accelerating returns, a fundamental law of the universe, so he says. And it applies to these core drivers of digital technologies: networks and computing systems, artificial intelligence and robotics, digital fabrication and nanotechnology, medicine and digital biology, and all of their derivative technologies like blockchain and virtual reality, et cetera, the derivative technologies from these core technologies. All of them are following these exponential growth curves. And it manifests itself in some phenomenal ways. Here's a product that Google released last year, which is an AI virtual assistant. And here's a replica of what they presented on stage. Now, mind you, one of these voices you're hearing is a human being. The other voice is an artificial intelligence reacting to, in real time, what the human being is saying. Can you tell who is who?
So how can I help you? Hi, I'm calling to book a women's haircut for a client. I'm looking for something on May 3rd. Sure, give me 1 second. Sure, What time are you looking for around?
At 12 p.m.
We do not have a 12 p.m. available. The closest we have to that is a 1:15.
Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.?
Depending on what service she would like. What service is she looking for?
Just a woman's haircut for now.
Okay, we have a 10 o'clock.
10 a.m. is fine.
Okay, what's her first name?
The first name is Lisa.
Okay, perfect. So I will see Lisa at 10 o'clock on May 3rd.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Great. Have a great day. Bye.
Great. So the one on the left is an AI, one on the right is a human being. This is so convincing that California had to pass a law immediately that if you're an AI, you have to identify yourself. Yeah. And this was their first rough prototype. Again, and this is a very important point I want to make. Any technology you see now, which you might be, oh wow, that's really amazing, including the tech that you're going to see during this conference, the next question you should be saying is, where is that going? With an exponential mindset. With an exponential mindset. So this applies to a number of different technology domains. Here is the dramatic exponential decrease in the cost of decoding the human genome. When we first decoded the human genome, it was $100 million. Now, any one of us can go online and decode our genome for $100. In the coming years, you'll do that for $50, then $20, then $1, then a penny. You'll be decoding your genome every time you use the bathroom. Genetic engineering is just coming of age. CRISPR engineering of treating your genetic code, your ATCGs in your genetic code, just like zeros and ones, to be manipulated and coded for optimal purposes. And now with CRISPR, we can cut out your genome from a living entity and recode it and put it back in. This has practical purposes. Some Chinese scientists use CRISPR to recode the genome of rice so it can grow in brackish water or salty water. Another exponential growth curve is in the robotics market size. Robotics is just coming of age as well and following these exponential curves. Digital manufacturing, 3D printing, so is the term you might be more familiar with, has a very important concept around it, and that is complexity is free. It doesn't matter how complex an object is for a 3D printer, it's free. Just like when you photocopy, if I draw a circle on a piece of paper and I photocopy that circle, it's the same cost as if I take a complex Michelangelo painting and I photocopy that painting. Complexity in the 3D world is free. And we're 3D printing objects The 3D printing market is following these exponential growth curves as well. And we're 3D printing objects as large as homes and entire apartment buildings, and as small as objects you can't even see with your eye, with materials that range in the hundreds, including metallic alloys and reused plastic and organic materials. 3D printing is revolutionizing manufacturing. The Internet of Things is just taking off. And the number of connected devices is following this steep exponential curve. And data, the new gold, is following exponential curves as well. This white line is linear growth. The yellow line is exponential growth. And this graph illustrates our dilemma. For anyone, whether you're a government official, a corporate leader, an investor, an entrepreneur, someone who's trying to solve social challenges, if you're thinking along that white line in terms of the future and not the yellow, then you're going to be left behind. Initially, exponential growth is deceptive. In the 1960s, we were promised flying cars. Well, where's our flying cars? They're coming now. The growth, the technological growth, has been growing slowly, exponentially, and now we're at a crossover point, such that the future is going to be a takeoff, not just of, quote, flying cars as a metaphor, but a whole range of these technologies. To help us think about what's going on here, Peter Diamandis, the other co-founder at Singularity University, has something called the 6 Ds of disruption. When any technology becomes digital, it goes to this stage of deceptive growth to disruptive growth. By dematerializing things, things which were materials get dematerialized. For example, if you think about all of the, quote, hardware in your phone, a voice recorder, a camera, a personal assistant, all the apps, those used to be hardwares that would take up lots of space and cost lots of money, which takes us to the next one, and that is demonetization. When things are digital, the price of them plummet. And when the price of technology plummets, they become democratized. And this is where things get really exciting for places like Tanzania, because anybody, anywhere, has access to these powerful technologies and can leverage the power of computing, power of digital biology, the power of digital manufacturing, like they never have been able to before, and create solutions that matter locally and globally. We're seeing a big phenomenon where the cost of things is driving towards zero, the performance is driving towards infinity, and scale is driving towards infinity, and impact is your imagination. To help us think about that, this is a great reference. Jeremy Rifkin talks about the zero marginal cost society. What happens when we have built an entire economy right now based on the concept of scarcity? If you think about it, our economic models are based on scarcity. When something is more scarce, the value goes up. Well, what happens when we live in a world when everything becomes abundant? When the marginal cost of things drive towards zero? You see this. You experience this every day with your camera. So this is Steve Sasson, who worked for Kodak in the 1970s, and he pulled out this giant, ugly, expensive camera, and he plopped it down on the boardroom of the C-suite of Kodak, and he said, this is a digital camera, and this is the future of photography. And what did the board do? We're into the paper cleaning business. That's our model. We make a lot of money by cleaning people's photographs, processing photographs. And if any of you are of my age set before digital cameras came around, you remember you used to have to buy a roll of film with maybe 24 little photographs on it, or 26 if you were splurging. And then you would decide to take it. Oh, I don't want to take a picture of you. I'll take a picture of you. Because you weren't worth it, but you are. And then you had to wait 2 weeks to get your thing back, and it cost a lot of money. Now, because photography has gone digital, what was scarce has become abundant. You can take as many photographs on your phone as your GB allows, and you can share them infinitely at a zero marginal cost. If the C-suite leaders at Kodak had thought with an exponential mindset at that time, they wouldn't have gone bankrupt. Others, like Instagram, knew the power of digital, the exponential trends, and small teams of 4 people at Instagram got $1 billion valuation in just a matter of years because they anticipated exponential trends. Companies, corporations around the world are nervous, and they have every reason to be, because massive disruptions are coming our way to corporations. So estimates are 50% of the current S&P 500 companies will be replaced in the next several years. Why? Because they're not preparing themselves for this digital transformation, this digital disruption. So there's a mantra that goes around Silicon Valley: disrupt yourself or lest you be disrupted. And this is where organizations like Deloitte and others are helping corporations anticipate these exponential trends and prepare themselves for it. At Singularity University, we have a slightly different take. Yes, we advise corporations, but our real care, our real thesis is that these technologies can be used to solve the world's biggest challenges. We call them the global grand challenges. We live in an abundant world. Peter Diamandis says these exponentially changing technologies will take scarce resources and make them abundant. What does that mean? An example is energy. 10 seconds of sunlight gives us 1 day of all of humanity's needs. Just 10 seconds. 1 hour of sunlight that comes from our sun to the planet Earth gives us enough energy for an entire year. You may think, how could we possibly tap into that? We would need way too much space to do that. Well, if you map that out, these little red squares are all we would need to do with current technology to be able to capture that much energy to serve humanity's needs. And sure enough, the price performance of solar power is following a dramatic exponential downward trend, especially as you compare solar's price performance to natural gas and oil. And here's a graph I just love. I love this graph because the world's leading energy experts get together every year and they try to project out what is going to be the global uptake on the global grid of solar power. So they try to project that out. And as you can imagine, there are billions and billions of dollars on the line to get these projections right. Every one of these colored lines is that year's projection. The black line is what happened. You would think they would get it right, but they get it consistently wrong. Why? And this is a hugely important point for all of you, all of us. Conventional wisdom, received wisdom of the past, simply does not apply in our exponential world, especially when you have vested interests in a particular industry. So we see this in the space of connecting people to the internet. So there's a global race going on to connect everyone on the planet to the internet in the next few years. And I know places like Tanzania, there are still huge areas and huge numbers of people who do not have access to the internet. That will change dramatically. Billions of new people are going to come online in the next 5 years. What happens when they come online? They can do things like this, using AI for learning to dematerialize learning and personalize learning to a learner's specific needs. So this is what's called the X Prize for Learning, which actually happened here in Tanzania with the support of the World Food Program. And they successfully demonstrated that AI can teach an illiterate and illiterate child within 1 year how to read and write without the aid of a human. Why is that important? Because right now our children are not getting what they need. Full stop. They're not getting the quality of education, they're not getting the attention, they're not getting the personalized learning. No matter how much you might want to defend the learning system, and I used to be a teacher in a school in Kenya, it's not working for our kids. We need to think dramatically differently. These are our alternatives. In the space of food, new meat, in vitro meat is coming around, which will make our meat healthier and cheaper and less environmentally impactful. And in fact, people thought, this could be crazy. How could you, especially in a US market, because we like our meat. People thought, no way is alternative meat going to be successful. Well, here's a company, Beyond Meat, that had the most successful IPO on the stock market last March since the year 2000. Dramatically successful. Change happens fast. Water is another example of a scarce resource, which, due to technology, the price performance of desalinating water is dropping dramatically. Extracting water from the atmosphere is becoming a reality, such that water, which is a scarce resource, is on the brink of becoming an abundant resource. In terms of challenges, Yuval Harari notes 3 main ones that we have for the world: nuclear war, climate change, technological disruption. By the way, Africa, Tanzania didn't cause any of these. They're unfortunately the recipient of these challenges. In fact, some say this is what's called the Doomsday Clock. It's closer to midnight now, meaning we're closer to global catastrophe than we ever have been since 1952-53, due to those sorts of challenges I mentioned before. What we need now is Africa rising. We need this now more than ever. We need African values asserted in this exponential technology era. This means not just receiving technologies from Silicon Valley or from China or from India or wherever they're coming, not being passive recipients, but actually asserting African values in that technology and building and making it yourselves. The world needs that now, because we've been going off in some wildly wrong directions. This is a major challenge and a major opportunity. What are those values? Sio kwa mimi kusema, but I have spoken with many of my African friends, and I asked them that specific question: what values would you want to see? What African values would you want to see in the future of technology? And I'm going to guess this is a very complex question to answer, and especially to harmonize around, but there are 3 that keep popping up when I ask this question: respect, community, and integrity. Respect, community, and integrity. So my challenge to all of you is reflect on what values you think are important from an African perspective, from a Tanzanian perspective, and assert those values as you engage with technology. We see this in Kenya. Here's a gentleman, Morris Betsa, who's created his own flying passenger drone. It's a working passenger drone. I have to say, though, I don't know if I'd want my head near those propellers as close as they are right now. That looks a little bit precarious, so I think the user-centered design, that'll change. The important thing is, this is a young inventor who's taken it on himself, not to purchase a drone from somewhere else and import it, but to, damn it, build it. Because he can. He's got what it takes up here. He's got what it takes in terms of accessing finances, and he's got what it takes in terms of the fundi and the maker's attitude. Just 2 nights ago, I also met this gentleman with his home-built electric car right here in Dar es Salaam. This may look a little bit funky to you, but apply the exponential mindset. He's just a few steps away on that exponential curve to having a commercially viable electrically made vehicle right here in Dar es Salaam. Issues of fairness come out when we talk about exponential technology, because exponential technology, if we don't do value-driven, you hear the term user-centered design. I like to use the term value-centered design. If we don't apply value-centered design when we engage with exponential technologies, we risk bifurcating humanity in terms of super haves and have-nots, or some haves. And that's not going to work for us. Here's a little video, tongue-in-cheek video, to illustrate what that might feel like if we don't instill fairness in the way that we engage with exponential technology.
You will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber.
So the point there is what was perfectly fine before became not fine as soon as that other monkey saw that this one got a great. Are we really that different? We're not. Fairness is built into us. As we engage, and you are all, by virtue of you being in this room, you are super powerful people. Super powerful. You have a responsibility to engage with technology in a way that uplifts all. We have huge challenges coming our way. Technological unemployment is a very real issue. At least there will be technological workforce disruption at the very least. We don't know what the outcome of that is going to be. Massive society with no jobs and no economic engagement, or whole new jobs that we can't even imagine are coming online. I personally do not know which one of those outcomes is going to happen. I've heard the debates, and I can't take a side. But I do know massive disruption is going to happen to the workforce. And we have to design for inclusivity. We have to design for abundance for all. So if you look at human development over time, from many years BC till now, an amazing technology happened in around 1775. The Watt steam engine happened, and along with it, a whole bunch of other enabling technologies. And human development took off on this exponential growth curve. We are now entering another era where exponential technologies, AI, digital biology, digital manufacturing, blockchain, et cetera, are leading us into a whole nother paradigm, another steep curve of human development. The question is, will that result in the betterment of humanity or not? My thesis is we now need more than ever African value-led exponential growth in technology. It's time for you to step up. The world needs it. We've been going down some wrong paths right now. Reflect on that and use your superpowers, whatever they may be, to instill those values, engage in these technologies, not just learn about them, not just use them, but build them yourselves. Thank you very much.